Greetings and welcome back once again to our fifth and final lecture dealing with our question of why did Islam spread so quickly. Today we'll be looking specifically at document F, our final bucket list, and how to create your chicken foot for this as well as your other DBQ lessons as well. So, as usual, make sure you have your DBQ packet available with you. You might want to have a piece of paper or something out to take notes with as well. You might get some ideas that might help you write your essay, which is due in a couple days. So, with that, let's get started. So, today, in this lesson, we are going to quickly do a review of our first 5 documents, documents A and E. We'll go into our document F, our latest and last document. We'll get into the bucket list and how to create that, what categories you might want to consider. Chicken foot, obviously, this is the one a lot of people have a difficulty with, but it is really not that difficult, and we'll show you what you mean by that. And finally, we'll look at how to organize your essay and what that's going to look like as well. So, let us begin. Recall, we have our document A, which is on the top left-hand corner here, labeled The Spread of Islam. This map, we talked about how trade was an important factor in the spread of Islam, the fact that people would go back and forth between all the way from as far as Spain to as far east as even India. And on the way, not only would they trade spices and silk and all these other things, but they would also talk to other people as well and trade ideas, including religion. And this played a very major role in the spread of Islam early on. In document B, which is on our top right-hand side here, we see some different verses of the Quran, and that some people liked the message that the Quran offered. It rewarded people for being good people. It seemed to be just and fair when it came to its judgments. So a lot of people just wanted that kind of simplicity, some of that basically was out there, you could see it, there wasn't any question, and it was written down. So there was no question about what it meant. Document C on the bottom left here, we'll zoom in right there, and you'll see some of the different battle plans that occurred between the Persians and the Byzantium empires. If you recall, this was a great time actually for the Islam's army to invade Byzantium, and the Persians were at war, and this is a great time for Islam to get in there and basically take them both out at the same time, since both of them had been fighting for so long. So we have a little bit of conquest involved dealing with that part of our essay. We have document D, which talked about the ordinance of government. And if you recall, this talks specifically about how one particular judge gave his interpretation of the 10 different policies that the imam, or the head of the Islam group, how his specific jobs and his responsibilities, basically as like the executive, the judicial, and the legislative person all in one, almost kind of like a dictatorship. And this is, again, what a judge said that the imam's responsibilities were. So it kind of talks a little bit about political importance as well, and not just wars and trades and the message itself. A little bit of politics, law creating and law judging and things like that. And then in our last document that we had there, which was document E, also talked about a little bit of political politics, if you'd excuse me. Talk about inadequacies of resources, that Muslims had to scratch meager livings, that a lot of these campaigns were not military, they were just to plunder and to continue on trying to not just expand the empire, but to be able to survive. That that these wars and paying these people to fight was costly, and in order to make sure that this money was still coming in, they had to keep conquering new lands to take their stuff and plunder these new areas. So a little bit of a different take on that. This document obviously relates a little bit to politics, but it also relates to the idea of conquest. Politics and the fact that in order to keep his people happy, he had to keep paying them. The imam would have to keep paying his people and showing them success. But the military conquest, obviously, with the expanding of the empire as well. So today we are going on to our last one, document F. A couple things I want to point out before I read this with you is that prior to this battle, and I'm assuming you read this already in some regard, that prior to this battle, that it was basically a battle between the Byzantium Empire and the Muslims that was going on. The Muslims had taken this one town of Hims in Syria, and the people there were paid in land tax to them. This was the beginning of the jizya. If you remember, the jizya is where people could pay, Christians and Jews could pay a tax in order to keep practicing their religion, even though it was an Islam nation. So this is the beginning of that jizya movement that we've mentioned a couple times in the past. A few Byzantine sources existed for this battle that we're going to talk about, and therefore it's hard to verify the accuracy of the numbers given in the document, but as a result, contemporary and modern estimates of troop size varied greatly. Some of these estimates say that the Muslims had between 25,000 and 40,000 people for this particular battle that we're reading about, as compared to the Byzantium soldiers, which had about 100,000 soldiers. So it's almost like a 4-to-1 advantage to the Byzantium Empire. However, it's also believed, based on historians, that a couple days before the battle, there was actually sandstorms, and the Byzantiums couldn't handle the sandstorms. They weren't used to them, where a lot of the Islam armies or the Muslim armies were, because they'd been battling for so long and knew how to handle it. So it's believed that they confused some of those Byzantium soldiers, was able to trick them and lead them into a valley where they just slaughtered thousands of them based on this little trick that they pulled. So a lot of good battle tactics that the Muslims were able to do in order to have the advantage going their way. So let's go through our document here. So please follow along as I read. Heraclius discovered a large Byzantium army numbering about 200,000. This army he put under the command of one of his choice men. The Muslims gathered together, and the Byzantium army marched against them. The battle they fought at El Yarmouk was one of the fiercest and bloodiest kind. In this battle, 24,000 Muslims took part. The Byzantiums and their followers in the battle tied themselves to each other by chains, so that no one might set his hope on flight. By Allah's help, some 70,000 of them were put to death. When Heraclius massed his troops against the Muslims, and the Muslims heard that they were coming to meet them at El Yarmouk, the Muslims refunded to the inhabitants of the Hims the land tax that they had taken from them, saying, "We are too busy to support and protect you. Take care of yourselves." But the people of Ham replied, "We like your rule, and justice is far better than the state of oppression and tyranny in which we were. The army of Heraclius we shall indeed repulse from the city." Saying this, they closed the gates to the city and guarded them. When by Allah's help the unbelievers were defeated and the Muslims won, they opened the gates of their cities, went out with the singers and music players who began to play, and paid the land tax. So, this is certainly one-sided of the story. If you notice, some of the facts that I mentioned earlier on don't mesh up with one or two of the facts that are mentioned in here. The Byzantium army, according to this document, had over 200,000, as compared to what I had mentioned a few moments ago, where it was only 100,000. So there's some questions there to be had. Additionally, who do you think wrote this? Was this person on the side of the Byzantium army, or they're on the side of the Muslim army? Think of how it was written and who would benefit from this kind of a story, and that might tell you who wrote it. Also, a thing to remember, especially about written history, is the fact that history is written by the winners. So they're going to obviously put their little side on it, their little ting on it. So if you can pick out which side won the battle here, that should probably tell you who this author was in favor of. Another thing to remember, though, also, as mentioned at the top of this article, is that this document was actually written about 200 years after the battle. So you need to be aware of that as well. Sometimes history is remembered by those who are not even there. by just stories that were passed down. History books even today are written by people who are not even there. They're just stories passed down and based on previous documents. So be aware that some of these facts might not be accurate because the guy wasn't even there. Keep that in mind. One thing I do want to ask you though, and to keep in mind, is what type of document is this, or what category can we put this document in? Does this talk about trade, which we've talked about earlier? Does it talk about the message of the Quran and the people being happy? Does it talk about any type of conquest, one group taking over another group? Or is there a discussion about any type of political order or politics involved in this? Think about those, and if you really think and look at it, and look at those 4 categories that I just named, you should be able to find one, if not 2 different categories that you can put in without any problems. Alright. With that, we need to turn our page to our bucket list because we're done with the documents, and we are going to start filling in our buckets to figure out what are our categories and what documents match with those categories. So I hope you're paying attention and listening and taking the best of this opportunity to get a couple of freebies here for those of you that are watching. So let's take a look at the directions here on bucketing, which many of you should know already. Look over the documents and organize them into your file buckets. Write the labels under each bucket and place the letter of the bucket in the bucket where they belong. Plan out either a 3 or 4 paragraph essay, and remember your bucket labels are going to become your body paragraphs. So, the 3 or 4 buckets that you use will be the bulk of your paper. This is an organizational tool. It's designed to help you not only find what your paragraphs are going to be about, but also what you're going to put into those paragraphs based on the documents and evidence that we found. Now, some of you have asked me, can you use other evidence that you found outside of this package? And I said that you can, but you have to be able to show evidence and that it fits with the correct category that you've made for it. You can pick any 4 categories or 3 categories you want. I encourage you to do something besides my own, but you need to be able to back up your categories or your topic with the evidence I presented or with any evidence that you found on your own. So, moving on, if you think about the different categories that we've talked about, and I'll just give you some of the hints that I gave you. We've talked about trade. We've talked about the Quran and the message that the Quran provides. We've talked about conquering and wars that they've expanded using a force. And we've talked about political order, that people liked the government, that it was more fair than under some other governments, like the Byzantium government, where the people, according to document F, that the citizens begged for the Byzantiums to be ousted so that the Islams could come in, and that they were actually willing to pay their taxes if the Byzantiums were forced out. So those are the 4 that I came up with. Feel free to use others, but please make sure that you're referencing. So, in this case, we'll look at, like our first bucket, you could do, obviously, trade. And based on trade, which document do you think matches trade? Similarly, our second bucket would be the message, which talks about the religious message that the Quran teaches and that the religion itself teaches as well. So I might want to make that my second bucket, like the message or the Quran's message that it offers. Which document do you think relates to people liking the message of Islam? See if you can figure that out. Third, conquering or conquest. Which documents might you find, if you use conquering as a category, which document or documents talk about war and expanding through military and force? Put those documents in that bucket. And the fourth bucket that I came up with was political order, coming up with how the government ran and why people seemed to like how the government was functioning. Which document or documents talked about that, with political and the government having some sort of control over the people that it had. Now, keep in mind also, we had 5 different documents. And, sorry, 6 documents. We have 4 buckets. And we can have multiple documents in multiple buckets. You can have the same document in different buckets because it might apply to a couple different places. That's perfectly acceptable. Nothing wrong with that. The more in one bucket, the easier it is to defend your argument for that particular category. So think about that, and it's perfectly acceptable. You might have a document that doesn't fit anywhere. So maybe you don't want to use that category, or come up with a different category where that document might fit better in. All these things to think about while you're creating your categories. But again, once you use these buckets, once you get your documents in these buckets, those are your paragraphs. You know what your topic for that paragraph is going to be. You know what evidence you're going to use because it's in your buckets. Now you just have to put it in your own words and explain to me and others actually, on why you think with your evidence that that is a category that helps you prove why Islam spread so quickly. And our final part is our thesis statement, which is a lot of people have the most problem with, but it is really not that difficult. All we're doing is answering the questions and giving our answers. That's all it is. We're not giving the specifics of our answers. We're just saying what the answers are right out there. No big deal. So let's read the directions here and I'll tell you what I mean. On the chicken foot below, write your thesis and your roadmap. Your thesis is always an opinion that answers the mini-Q question. The roadmap is created from your bucket labels and lists the topics that you will examine in order to prove your thesis. So, on the bottom, on the long line, as you can see, they give you plenty of room to write. You are answering, or basically stating, the answer to your question. Now, because this is just such a basic answer, we know what the answer is. We just need to give the reasons why. So, on our long line here, our starting sentence is simply going to be the Islam religion spread so fast because, or Islam spread so quickly because. That's on that long line. Islam spread so quickly because. Everybody should have that. No questions. That's what it is. You are starting your sentence with answering. This shows that you're answering the question, basically. Then on the chicken foot on the roadmap, which is the actual fingers of that chicken foot, we're giving our 4 reasons why, which are our 4 buckets, our 4 categories. So let's look back and I'll show you what I did with my categories. Islam spread so quickly because of religion, the message in the Quran, conquest, and political order. Period. That's it. You're done. And if you look at the rubric, which you should have picked up, the thesis statement, the statement we just made, is the last sentence of your first paragraph. You just finished one part of your introductory paragraph. This is what your entire paper is about, this one sentence. So you need to make sure it's done right and clearly. Additionally, each of those fingers, or each part of those roadmaps, is the introduction to each of your body paragraphs. So at the top, our first description, our first category, was trade. So when you do your first body paragraph, you're going to put down trade was an important factor in the spreading of Islam. Period. That's the first sentence for your second paragraph. For your third paragraph, we're talking about the message. So your third paragraph should start by saying something like, the message of the Quran helped spread the message, or helped spread Islam religion. The message of the Quran helped spread Islam. Okay, something like that. You're just using what you already wrote down here as the introductory sentence for each of your body paragraphs. This is just one of many tools you can use to help you organize and plan for each of those paragraphs. I would also encourage you to use the next page on your DBQ, which is actually the practice writing or the outline of writing an essay paper. Use it as a tool to help you write that essay. In the end, you may only use 3 of the 4 different items on this roadmap, or of the toes on the chicken foot. You may use all 4 of them, in which case you should have either a 5-paragraph essay or a 6-paragraph essay, depending on how many topics or categories you use to answer your question. Please, you do the best you can. Use the evidence to assist you. Make sure you're citing the evidence in your paragraph. All right? So, moving on. What's next? Your essay is due in 2 days. Okay? Remember that. It needs to be 5 to 6 paragraphs. 1 introductory paragraph, 3 to 4 body paragraphs, and 1 concluding paragraph. Remember, in your body paragraphs, you must cite your evidence. You can use, in Lecture 1, it says, or it shows. In Lecture 3, it comments. You need to show some sort of evidence that you know what you're talking about, and you can back it up with what somebody else said. However, don't just copy what that person said and leave it like that. You need to put your own ting on it as well, your own explanation. That's what we call an argument. You can use that person's evidence to help you prove your argument. But they've already proven their side. You need to prove your side. But you can use their help to do it. You must put some of it in your own words with your own descriptions. Otherwise, it's not yours. You're just copying what somebody else did and giving them credit for what they already did. There's nothing wrong with that, but I want to know how you figured it out. But you can use them, these other people's, this evidence to help you. And with that, I'm done. I'll leave you alone to finish whatever you need to do. Again, a reminder, you need to have this essay done by in 2 days, because we are starting our next unit on the following day. If you have any questions, please let me know. If you'd like me to check over some of your paragraphs before you submit them, I'm more than willing to look at it. Please use the rubric that was handed out to you to show you exactly what needs to be in each of those paragraphs so that you can have the opportunity to get the best grade possible. Remember, you can also retake the essays if you're not satisfied, but it's just more work you'll end up having to do when it's just much easier just to do it right the first time. It will take you a little bit of time, but I think you'll be happy with the results if you put effort into it. And with that, I'll let you go. Have a great day, and good luck.